Okay, let's talk about Saturday's demo. It was good, wasn't it?
God, is anybody else feeling like really overwhelmed or all this like this stuff that's happening? I mean, it's like I feel like I'm sitting here laughing because if I don't laugh, you know, I'm just gonna like lose it or something.
I heard one woman along the parade route say to her young son, "Look at those guys. They're for peace and not war. Isn't that great?" And that's what made me feel really good. If I could give a message, if I could give a message to. I know it. Exactly. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Because the more I learn, the more I say to myself, you know, what's it all about and why? You know, I ask a lot of whys these days, and I'm learning more and more about the government and what it's all about. So exactly. That's what I'd like to see done. Exactly. She should be up here talking. Okay, thanks. Anyway, what can we do? We can be gathered here today. That's just a small part of. Exactly. And that's all it takes.
Anything as far as the politicians
that's
and
all
what
it
they're
takes.
talking about. Hey, as far as people banding together, excuse me, we are a small minority as far as the groups that are out here today. Get down, okay?
Right.
But we have got people starving in the streets.
I know that. Right behind. I was in Washington. January, whatever date that was, and we happened to be one of the first buses into Washington, and we happened to go behind our Capitol, and I was appalled, and I was almost in tears what I saw right behind Mr. Bush's back door, of all the crime, the poverty, housing, and the drugs, and the killing, right there behind his back door, and here he is in another country trying to provoke peace or whatever the hell he's talking about.
Basically, one of the veterans was more or less, sort of not necessarily attacked, but to me that seems to be crucial right now. Is all to me. I've really been thinking about how much so-called peace movement has been compromised by the waving of flags itself. I mean, at first I got on the bandwagon to say, okay, this is good, yeah, we support the troops, but I think I really start to see the flag at the protest as a very negative influence the more I think about it. And at the time I was sort of embarrassed and upset by this woman attacking him, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. And I see there's a hell of a lot of compromise that has gone on as far as how, you know, to me still it is, how can I support the troops and where's the accountability there? You know, if I go over that edge, no one's accountable.
I had a lot of appreciation for Ed, and I guess other people like him who got involved in that war and were gung-ho, didn't know a whole lot about what was going on, but after going through that war, they began to realize what was really happening in this country. I have a lot of appreciation for people who have the guts to realize that they were on the wrong side of something. And I think for that reason, I think we have to really take our hats off for the Veterans of Peace. Our next speaker is a representative of the Freedom Now organization, Azania Mugabe.
Basically what I want to talk about was the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal, who is facing the death penalty. And I basically want to talk about him only as a representative of hundreds upon hundreds of political prisoners which are in prison now because of their political activity. Mumia Abu-Jamal is a journalist who was basically, his purpose was to expose the injustices in the Philadelphia in Philadelphia, basically, if those who remember, moved the political family which had gotten bombed in Philadelphia. He was a journalist who had covered the story and was trying to expose the injustice of destroying a 6-block area of homes. As a result of his concentrated efforts of trying to expose the injustices of MOVE, the FBI, CIA connection found it necessary to remove him. And in fact, they tried to do that physically by killing him, and they shot him. And when he woke up, he was shot in the stomach, and when he woke up, they charged him with the murder of a policeman, which is real classic. You'll find that if you study the list of political prisoners, that's one of their favorite charges, is that they killed a policeman. There are hundreds upon hundreds of political prisoners like Mumia Hinti. What is the result of this? Well, the result of this is that I know in many of our communities, particularly African American communities, our leadership has basically been swooped up. Our leadership is sitting in prison. For those of us that were not killed, the rest of our leadership sits in prison. They belong to us. We demand for their immediate release. This is not only in the African American community, this is our women's leadership, our white revolutionary leadership, our Native American leadership. Leonard Peltier also needs to be removed immediately. At this time, we demand this.
Yeah, I thought the speeches were really good too. Although this one, more than any other action, it seemed like we were talking to ourselves. So much. I mean, it was just, there was like that little cement circle. I know. And there was like a boundary around it that no one else could come near and we couldn't get out of. You know, and it was very much, I mean, anything that happens in Loring Park with a permit is in that area because they don't get permits for anywhere else in the park as part of it, you know, so the decision being made to do it in Loring Park, I think, was not a very wise call, you know, but I think part of it was the weather too, because generally on Saturdays, if it's nice, there's a lot of foot traffic going through the park. But
We know there's a war going on in the Persian Gulf, but there's a war being waged here. I mean, just the fact that this government can put the resources they're putting into over $1 billion a day into that conflict says that if they gather the will to do something, they can do it. That means if we gather the will or somehow force them to decide to put those kind of resources into the social ills that we have here, we'd have a different kind of America. And I think that's why we're gathered here. And it's my contention that we're going to have to keep gathering at places like this over and over again, even after the Persian Gulf conflict is over. I hope people don't go home and say, well, I'm just going to take this little part and then do my thing. I think we're going to all have to come together more often in places like that. People carrying banners for different issues, but all of us should be in the same boat. All of us should be working to bring this system down or bring into being a new system, a more just system.
He was talking about demoralization and things like that. And I mean, to have a demonstration is sort of a two-edged sword, and it can be very empowering and very powerful and all that sort of thing, but it can be the opposite as well. And I think more or less it was probably, you know, a negative thing for a lot of people. I mean, it was definitely a real potential for it to just end up feeding into the demoralization that people were feeling because it wasn't, you know, this really strong turnout for various reasons. So I just think it's, you know, a tricky thing with demos like that, and you know, I just feel like if there really wasn't, because of timing with other events, or because there really wasn't energy amongst initiating groups, or whatever else it was, I mean, to me it doesn't serve any great purpose to have a demo like that, to be as small as it was, as white as it was, you know, and all that sort of thing, even though there were some strong speakers that were fine.
And I think that there's perhaps a feeling of powerlessness, hopelessness among many of the brothers and sisters that are still standing, who have not lost their senses.
to stand and continue standing against the naked aggression of the United States government. While we may feel that we don't count, I must ask the question that who is going to hold the American government accountable? It appears that America now wants to dominate the world with its high-tech weapons of destruction, and in their rhetoric of genocide, they talk about a new world order. When did we last hear that kind of rhetoric? During the Nazi empire of Hitler. And I have made these parallels time and time again because I think that many of the young people who are here today standing have perhaps forgotten that part of world history. New World Order, blitzkrieg. Now we hear the same rhetoric, including Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and America, 90% they say, blindly waving flags and blindly saying, let's support our troops. Desert Storm, stormtroopers, blitzkrieg, New World Order, history is once again being played out right here in occupied Indian territory, now called the United States of America.
I don't think there's hardly a demo we can't. I'm coming more to this understanding the more I do demos. The more I get tired of doing them. But no, I love to do them. But that there has to be constant pressure, even when they're small. That it, you know, there's two. We're getting into kind of a sum up area in general, but which I would propose we go into after this, since we're kind of merging in that anyway. But that I think it's okay to have demonstrations, and I think it's okay, you know, whatever, just to kind of keep up that there's opposition, even if it's kind of the same people, just having that presence, you know, that there's still opposition. It does do things, you know, if the media covers it, just the posters going around, even if people don't come, they still see all over that there's this opposition still happening. And I think that's important.
The last few weeks have seen an amazing display of the real criminal nature of our government. That our government has organized the deaths of between 100 and 300,000 people in Iraq and in Kuwait. And these deaths are not these deaths are not talked about in the news and not reflected. You know, according to the TV, you know, this war was all conducted with very smart bombs that, you know, as one of the cartoonists had it, they would stop and ask for the directions to the defense ministry. But we all know that that's not true. And we know, we have to understand too just how criminal this war was. That this war was conducted not for any political principle, wasn't conducted for the freedom of Kuwait, wasn't conducted for the rights of small nations, wasn't conducted for any reason that any you know, human being with any sense of decency would support. It was conducted to defend the oil companies and the profits. It was conducted as a part of essentially the redivision of the region of the Middle East in this new world order, as Bush calls it, or the new redivision, the new colonialism. And it's criminal, and I think we just have to keep saying that this is criminal. This is nothing to celebrate. This is nothing to celebrate. It's nothing to say how proud we are of. It's something that we should say is one of the worst things conducted by our government in history, and we have to denounce it and keep telling the truth about it.
Okay, I propose that we go on to the next thing here. We could talk about a general sum up of what we've done, but I would like personally to see it go in the direction of what has worked and what hasn't worked, and maybe look at it from the point of view of what our goals are for the future. I mean, I personally think if we just sort of quit now, we are sort of defeated in a way, because it's not over. You know, all the troops aren't out of Iraq, first of all. second of all, you know, there's all kinds of things happening there, and all kinds of things are coming out now about what, you know, were some of the real reasons we went there, like in the mainstream media. So this might be a time where if we really start pushing full stream ahead, we can build the movement up, because it sort of got big and sort of petered out a little bit.
Why did we have to go over there and fight a war that didn't have anything to do with us? It doesn't make any sense. Does it? Oh, excuse me. The paper says we lost 40 lives. Excuse me, I think we lost more than that. Yeah. Okay? Now, as far as the things that are being settled down now, oh, we're still fighting, but the government says we're bringing our men home. Excuse me, but we're still fighting. All right. Okay? Right. So, if we're still fighting, the war is not over. Right. So, that's a lie. Oh, we're fooled, okay? We're fooled. Hey, that's a laugh. Can we get a laugh? Okay? We're still dying over there. We don't have all our people. So they can't even get water because there's oil in it. Oh, we've got things burning all over the place. What's the purpose? Hassan, or whatever his name is, excuse me, I can't even pronounce it right. Because it was a waste of lives and energy. Why? Yes, we want to save Kuwait for whatever they're going through, but what about us? We got people sleeping in cartons. We got people starving. And we're gonna support bombs to kill more people? Oh, excuse me, that does not make any sense. That's a senseless waste of life. Yeah. Man on earth is not gonna get together and talk about peace. We're gonna get little groups like this and gonna say, look, we're starving over here. We're dying over here. We can't even live. How are you gonna help me? Help me! Where are you? We're dying! Help me, somebody!
I mean, I think there are three reasons the numbers went down. One was just because people were getting really defeated by what was happening. Not to mention getting really tired. You know, I mean, there is a point to physical exhaustion and feeling like you just can't. I mean, and depression just feeds off of it. You know. And if people think there's nothing that can be done, I think it's a lot harder to get yourself going to go out to a demonstration. So I think that was part of it. Not to mention the weather. I think another thing, a real major thing was, the more I think about it, was the whole media blitz that the government was able to succeed at around the Vietnam issue, the like you were saying earlier about support the troops, and I think that we kind of played into that, just in the sense that they were able to convince people that the reason Vietnam was lost was because people were out in the streets here, and that the reason that Vietnam veterans, the people who fought in Vietnam, are fucked up in the head is because they weren't welcomed with open arms when they got back from massacring, you know, thousands upon thousands of civilians.
You know, in those first days, you know, just before the bombing and just after it started, I mean, people were real clear about how uneasy they felt about that. I mean, they were real clear, this is not okay. And it seems to me, I mean, like, I think about people that I work with who never went to a single demo, and yet talked to me over and over and over again about how uneasy they were with the whole thing, and how, you know, they didn't know, they couldn't find a response that felt okay for them. You know, they didn't want to do nothing or say nothing, and yet they didn't have a sense of a way that felt okay for them. And it seems to me that those people just got real used to feeling uneasy until it just kind of went away, you know?
There was something in The Nation a little while ago by Alexander Coburn about this academic study that was done of the war and TV, and it found that, you know, it was interviewing all these adults and things like that, and it found that the more people watched TV, the less they knew about the Mideast and the war. There was a direct correlation. The more people watched TV, the less they knew about anything. And so Coburn criticized the kind of analysis that different groups might have about that well, the media's failing to do its job of informing people. And so his point was, well, that's not the media's job. It's not to inform people at all. In fact, the opposite. And he did it very successfully in disinforming people and pacifying people and all that sort of thing. And I think that's really one of the crucial things, because we don't have access to TV for the most part, and that's really where it is in terms of media in this country. Something like 75% of the people get all of their news from TV, all of it. So, that doesn't leave too many people that read, for example, let alone read our leaflets, let alone read books. And as far as the media goes, I mean, it's just a total whitewash as far as the war goes. I mean, and I think, the thing that the CCO president said about how, the war was good for their ratings and thus their profits speaks a lot to that, because you have everything to gain by exploiting patriotic sentiment and everything to lose by challenging people to think critically. It's just the way it is. And even though, there's every case in the world to be made for trying to challenge people and to prevent alternative viewpoints and all these kinds of things, I mean, that's not where they're at. They're corporations, and they look at the war and they see a great chance to exploit, the interest and everything else that it generates, and that's exactly what they did.
Well, maybe what we need to be doing then is challenging people to think, as opposed just to supplying them with all this information, because that might be sort of what the problem is in general with Americans, is that we absorb all this information, but we don't debate about it. So maybe we could have a debate starting off with a few people. I mean, maybe we can get somebody that's sort of important, that supported the war effort, and then get somebody that sort of knows what they're talking about to debate with them in a public place. People that want to set the agenda for the debate, which should happen sometime in the future, but to organize that, set the agenda for it, get a hold of other people, set up the plan, the game plan. Yeah, I'll do that too. Did anybody else want to do that besides Devin and I? Okay. The delegations, sending people out to speak to whoever we decide to speak to about El Salvador. Anybody want to go? It could be a real educational experience.
I don't know if I can remember. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? How about you over there with the camera?
But it would be good if we mentioned as CISPES that we, at the very end, I think it would be good to make a statement about his policy with the Persian Gulf. Can we do that? Can we combine that? I think we should.
I think, yeah, it would definitely be fair to mention it. Maybe we shouldn't push it because, he obviously did that as a protection for himself.
Yeah. Is his aide going to be there? Or?
He's going.
We hope.
So we're going to talk to his aide as opposed to us?
No, he's in Washington.
We rarely get the real people. If we really want to force things, we have demanded that they call Washington to talk to the person in the office. And I just wonder too, like the whole chemical weapons thing.
Yeah, where are these chemical weapons?
I would have used those.
If,
immediately.
Yeah, if he was desperate enough to set all these oil fields on fire, if he was desperate enough to take the measures
and now that
he
he's in his own
desperate
country,
enough
trying to squash rebellions, now he's using his gas, and now he's using his napalm, and it's like...
Yeah, well, the thing is, the U.S. was using it, so I'm sure that they're claiming that, I mean, how easy is it to claim that Iraq is using it now, because then they can blame these people who have already been fried.
It's like, oh, it was them.
That's why they're not doing anything about this rebellion, because that way they can claim that all of these deaths are from that.
The rebellion and not from their saturation bombing, and not their 20% accurate, 80% of the bombs that drop dumb bombs,
Mark, you're going to a meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. I can have you meet with Sky.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, just want to sit down.
All right.
So thank you.
The union office.
Senator Wilson's office can help you.
I'm Scott Adams.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Paulette.
Hi, Paulette.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm Sherry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm Devin.
I'm ready.
I'm Bradley.
We're all members of CISPES, Indian Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, and CISPES' Persian Gulf Task Force.
We were also wondering if you could tell us why Senator Wellstone appeared to change his position as the air war became closer, he appeared to fall in line behind President Bush, as opposed to continuing his open
His
opposition
opposition
to offensive military action in the Gulf.
Well, yeah, it's a matter of perception too. I think the mainstream media did a lot of that, of where he was coming from. He never wavered on his position of, the war is not right. He did not support aggression, and he did support the initial deployment of troops back in August. He didn't support the second deployment in November because he said that was offensive. He was against all offensive measures. Some of the things that he was saying, a lot of people had a hard time saying where they were coming from in their, in defining support for the troops and opposition to policies. And he spent a lot of time working with military family groups that were opposed to the policies.
One thing that I just want to caution you on too is knowing a great deal of how the media works, is that you can say, I support the troops, and they'll cut you off there, as the whole taped interview can include a great deal more.
Yeah, it's
what I think.
What the press, they get their sound bites. In places where he was allowed to be fully quoted in alternative press, I think you'll see different answers than what you heard in the 10 seconds that they gave him. He talked about tremendous loss of life on both sides. He continued to talk about that. He said he can feel good about us not having tremendous casualties, but at the same time, he did talk about loss of life on the other side. He did call for a pause in the bombing to bring out a solution. He did call for any and all diplomatic efforts throughout the war, and it was a very unpopular position. He was told by some Democrats to lead and we'll follow, but nobody followed him.
One of the things too is that I think it was very unclear what quote-unquote support to the troops meant. On a more personal level, the stuff that we dealt with through the office was, a case-by-case situation of people who really needed help. Families in the military who were losing their housing, had no food, things like that. And
who were getting kicked out of their house. They had no house, they were homeless, and they had no food. So, it's a real dichotomy of goals.
The whole support the troops, the phrase has been used in a lot of ways by the media, has been used as a tactic to weaken the anti-war movement.
Yeah, well, there's groups which were quote-unquote non-political, support our country's military, things like that, which were in many cases very pro-war.
And very anti-well stuff.
Yeah. So, that's the other thing, is I said, knowing what we were doing to support the troops versus what other groups considered supporting the troops are two very different things too. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
So again, I want to thank you all for coming out. I want you to remember, the slogan that we coined in our struggle against police brutality here. If there's no justice, there's no peace. And if we don't get no justice, they shouldn't get no peace. Y'all agree? Thanks again. Oh, man.